Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to Town Hall number 14 of the Rules as Code Guild. This is going to be a little bit different this morning. We've got a small team, and yeah, we had some late changes in our schedule. So we thought we'd take the opportunity to have an open discussion around a subject that was brought up in Town Hall number 11 by Matti Schneider from the Open Fisca Association, which is based in France. I don't think it's a secret that Con is also a member of that association, which is an awesome thing. So now there is an Open Fiscal Association, there is a Rules as Code Guild, and Matti, bless his cotton socks, laid down the challenge that maybe we need a Rules as Code foundation. He outlined a little bit of the context, the global move towards Rules as Code, some of the things that are happening, duplication, not using open source tools, concentrating on open source tools, concentrating on too few open source tools, except there was a lot in the discussion that we had in Rules as Code Guild number 11. And if you want to go back and watch that before you come back to this discussion, I'd highly recommend it, because it gives you some context for where we're going today. So we've got a small group at the moment. There may be others that join us as we go along. But we talked yesterday about taking this opportunity to just tease out the problem a little bit and find out how maybe the Rules as Code Guild and the Rules as Code Foundation, if there is to be one, might coexist or overlap, or one becomes the other, or do we need it at all? So that's the context setting for today's conversation. I did, so why me? Thank you. Cheers. So I have been interested, my name's Jo. I've been interested in this topic, this subject for a long time. Welcome, Ben. Thank you for coming along this morning. As an entrepreneur and working with entrepreneurs, rules are often part of the problem for anything to get done. They're ambiguous, and maybe in some cases they should be ambiguous, but the actual application of them by human beings is sometimes different across different jurisdictions, across different places. They're not always clear, they're not easily referenceable, and as we move into this AI-driven world that we are walking towards, they become more and more and more important that they are accessible and understandable by humans and machines. So Rules as Code is becoming more and more important. I was very fortunate to be able to work with Pia and the Salsa crew on some projects over a year ago now, and the Rules as Code Guild was an outcome of that. So this feels like a progression conversation. I'm very grateful to Matti for laying down that photo in that challenge, Maori word, laying down that challenge in our 11th session of the Rules of Code Guild. So that's me. I haven't had too much time to prepare because we literally decided to do this yesterday. But I do have some kind of questions and a bit of a guide, which is not going to appear on a slide, and we can make it as open as possible. But some questions that I came up with were, what is the guild currently doing? Con actually instigated this yesterday at the start of the conversation. So what is the guild doing? What would be the difference between a guild and a foundation? That's one question. Why might the foundation be challenging to get off the ground? we've got lots of challenges, time and money being the obvious ones, but what are the other challenges around it? What form could this take? What would be the rules of the rules as code foundation? Or how would we decide the rules as code foundation? And then the last one that I thought we'd end up with, if we get there, is what should we do next? Really simple one. So in order, Con, if I can I ask you to just talk a little bit about, because you and I worked together on the charter for the Rules as Code Guild right at the very beginning. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you think the Rules as Code Guild is about, and what are we doing?
Yeah, thanks, Jo. So I think from my perspective, the gap that the Guild filled in was sort of made evident as we were engaging with Australian government. It was about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, nearly 2 years ago, where Department of Finance, GovCMS, decided that they, Sharon Clarkson made the announcement that she was getting behind Rules as Code and trying to offer it, to set up Rules as Code as a utility, as an enterprise service, just as they do with the GovCMS Drupal distribution. But alongside that, they would have Rules as Code for any government agency to be able to host their rules and to make them available in a performance secure platform. So that, and even preceding that, we had done a Salsa Digital, that is, had done a proof of concept, and it became evident, and we wrote a white paper around that concept, and it became evident that governance would be a key challenge, and who would own the rules, who would coordinate these rules amongst the different agencies, given that obviously there'd be multiple agencies posting their rules on the common platform. Who would manage the standards around those rules? And it's not something, at the time at least, that I thought finance would be interested in doing. They had enough on their plate just trying to set up the platform. It wasn't something that any private entity should do, because their standards, they should be open and objective and community-led, in an open source type sense. And so for me, that meant, well, a guild that's independent of any entity, independent of Salsa or anyone else, should be set up as a place where stakeholders, and it can be anyone, it can be technical, it can be non-technical, lawyers, developers, it could be anyone that's interested in Rules as Code, can come together and discuss matters, and potentially, at the time, I was thinking, could start the conversation around standards at whatever level. And I know there are people in the community that believe it's premature to talk about standards. I respect that. But standards or any other sort of governance-related issues. And so that's where the Rules Code fit in, and that's the charter that is represented there. It's technology agnostic. It's not tied to any individual rules engine. And as I said, anyone can, it's free to join, and it's just an open place for discussion. And that's what the Guild, that's the idea behind the Guild, and that's why we're meeting and we have these town halls to share ideas. I suppose that feeds into a foundation, from what I understand, and that's what we're here to talk about, is there needs to be a vehicle for actioning things formally. There may need to be a vehicle for or an entity to be able to fund things, to gather funds and put them into and invest them into certain initiatives, research, or whatever else it might be. And so that goes beyond what the Guild is designed to do. The Guild is just an open discussion, a place, a space for discussion.
Thanks, Con. Do you think we're doing that? Have we been successful in doing that over the last 12 months? We never set ourselves KPIs, actually, for working out how we measure this.
Yeah, our main activity at the moment, I mean, we provide resources on the website. We have a website. We share resources. We have a Slack channel. We can talk about, you know, topical things. And we have these town halls, which I think are a critical part of it, where we give a platform to stakeholders, important stakeholders, you know, Pia Andrews, Matti, and, you know, Jason Morris, Martin Perron. There's many people that have presented at this forum, Ariane from Georgetown University. There's many people that are key people in the Rules as Code community that have presented at these town forums and contributed, and we've been able to make available those discussions and those presentations on YouTube. And I just think that's a very important part of what we do. We could do a lot more, obviously, but it's time and money from people. Yeah, time is money, I suppose, in a sense, from people. And so that's always a constraint. But I think with the very limited resources we have, I think we've created a good platform for people to share ideas on important rules as code topics.
Thanks. Thank you, Con. Does anybody have anything else to add? Or maybe we maybe we can move into the kind of the second question there, which was, so what would the difference be, or what do we, maybe we could go around the room. What could be the differences between a Rules as Code Guild and the Rules as Code Foundation?
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I hear you well.
Cool. So it's just some random thoughts on all of this. So originally, if I sort of step back and think about the original purpose intent of the guild, and then Con represented a whole bunch of that. I'll give my perspective as well. Was a couple of things. It was around education, awareness, collaboration, right? To educate and inform public on Rules as Code, gather industry practitioners in Rules as Code to exchange and share case studies, stories, exchange challenges, barriers, wins. What it wasn't, of course, is what the idea of a foundation is or could be. And it might be worth Jo actually talking about what is the greater, bigger vision of the foundation. But if just from the conversations we've had and from what Matti, the seed that Matti planted, the foundation feels like it's a bigger scope where, again, industry leaders, practitioners come to help build and develop the industry and the standards around the industry. And getting the right people who have influence to help form those standards and build that industry. And so is the guild that today? No. Could the guild become that tomorrow? Perhaps, yes, maybe. Does it mean, but could it equally be two separate things? Possibly also. It's really a discussion, right, about the pros and cons of keeping them merging, elevating the guild to move towards a foundation that is beyond what originally started, originally around Open Fiscal, although we tried to be technology agnostic, to be something bigger, versus being separate. So that's sort of my random thoughts on this. Yeah.
Thanks, Alfred. Yeah, definitely two things at the moment. One just being an idea, and one actually having 12 months of traction, if nothing else. Philip, did you have anything to offer about the difference between the two? Do you have thoughts about a Rules as Code Foundation and the Guild as we've been running it at the moment?
Yeah, I think Con mentioned a couple of important items there just around funding and also around action, right? And those two things are very linked, right? Because it's very hard to start taking action if there's no money to do it. And I think just to what Alfred was saying there as well, should there actually be these two separate entities, or would it be more like potentially trying to upgrade the guild into a foundation and start looking at some of those options around how could we attract funding? How do we kind of start looking at things like, you know, what standards do we believe should be in place? How could we start developing those, you know, and starting to get a little bit more active in, you know, producing some really strong assets for that kind of rules as code space globally. You know, I think, yeah, it's mentioned a couple of times, there are a number of governments looking at this in more depth right now. So, you know, with the GovCMS program here, there's the executive orders in the US as well, talking about rules as code. So there's definitely a lot more kind of increasing interest in the space. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't got any strong conclusions on it. I'm just musing about it now or something like it. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
We're all at the start of the journey, right?
Yeah. But it is really interesting thinking, right? And I think it would actually make quite a big difference if it was something that we could put together, particularly just kind of coming back to that one thing of funding and then funding for actions. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think, sorry, Jo, I think I could also draw a parallel from the experience with the Open Fisca Association. It's and you know, that whole movement of moving from, so Open Fisca, I'm on the board, just declaring, of Open Fisca, of the Open Fisca Association, alongside Matti and Pierre and others, and Hamish and a couple of other people, important people in the rules as code space. But so that was, Open Fisca was running an open source project for many years, and only at the beginning of this year did they create an Open Fisca. Did we create an Open Fisca Association? There was a charter, foundation members were notified, and then it moved. And the reason behind it was, while it was, you know, a great open source project, being able to promote that project was difficult because there was no funding. Being able to, you know, fund initiatives around coordination with the community around roadmap initiatives or things like that were hard to do without an entity, and without funding and without membership, paid membership. And that was quite a large body of work, but it just meant now we've got an entity. The journey has been, you know, it's like setting up a business, right? You've got to set up an entity, you've got to set up a bank account and accounting systems and a board and set up all the governance structures for a board. It's all possible and doable, and it's been done for the Open Fisca Association as an example, obviously, and many other foundations and associations. Things like, you know, we couldn't use the word foundation for the Open Fisca. We wanted Open Fisca Foundation, but in France that means something that we couldn't comply with, so we had to change the name. There's all sorts of, you know, that's in the weeds, that's the difficulties. But what we have today is a board, and we do have memberships, we do have a method of funding, we do have a bank account and all sorts of other things set up, ready to go, to be able to invest in various initiatives. Matti Schneider is the executive director. He does a lot of promotion. He runs around, goes to conferences and meetings with key stakeholders all over the world, Japan, Germany, everywhere. It's sort of he's recently come off a conference marathon. And I only share that as an example of, a real life example of the birth of the equivalent of a foundation in a different context. It's related, but it's different. Obviously, the Open Fisca, the Rules as Code Foundation, would be technology agnostic and have different outcomes. But I think sharing that experience might help also inform this discussion.
It is useful, and there is a lot of it's a heavy lift. It's not a thing to take lightly, right? Yeah, totally get that. And the journey from essentially an open source project, loosely coupled open source project being used by various teams around the world, and a very small core team of maintainers and developers, from that to an association is a big jump by itself, right? And this is an additional layer on top of that, potentially. I know Ben. Ben and I have known each other for a very long time. Ben comes to this conversation with a municipal view of rules, having worked with councils, right, in New Zealand. Ben, I wonder whether you have any questions to ask or things to offer at this point.
Got it. Yeah, no, I'm new to this space. The guild. I attended one of the town halls just as a bit of a sit-in, and kind of been doing some arm's length observation. Keen to be more involved, and can certainly see the whole premise of what you've tried to achieve, and the I guess the mission and the values of where this whole approach of rules as code is going, and how that could apply to certainly my career within a local government setting, and also more from a community-led development and sort of self-sovereign ways of organizing small community governance. So yeah, it's I don't have any particular opinions other than I think it's a really interesting stage that you're approaching in terms of particularly I think it was Alfred on the call there. Hi. The earlier comment around, is it potentially a transition, and is this a growth stage of the guild into the foundation, or is these different entities, for lack of a better word, or different purposes of what those could achieve? So yeah, I'm finding it's a really interesting just conversation for me to hear and see how and where I might be able to see myself fitting in.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we included you in the conversation. It's another view which maybe even Matti hasn't thought about, maybe Open Fisca hasn't even thought about. So as well as the things that Matti talked about when he talked about the foundation, which is multiple jurisdictions across the world starting to look at rules as code and think about taking their rule books and making them machine readable as well as human readable. There was a global conversation, and the different jurisdictions are obviously a part of the problem that maybe a foundation can help solve with standards and interoperability. But there's also the closer to the ground problem, which is how do you make this useful for that very, very personal community councils in New Zealand. But then you've also got, a federal system in Australia. So there's layers in each jurisdiction as well. That at the moment, like I'm sure the budgets of the likes of Hamilton City Council and Tauranga City Council and Auckland City Council don't have budget to even think about taking their policies, their regulations, the things that they do and turning them into code. Not even close to having the budget for that kind of operation. But that's really where it all starts. If we are gonna encode everything, we need the things that matter to the people the closest, as well as those big picture rules, to be machine readable, because otherwise, things are going to get out of alignment very quickly and further away from the humans who these rules affect, right? So I'm really pleased that you're here, Ben, and part of the conversation, because it does anchor it in a different layer of rules as well. So I appreciate your contribution. Don't want to leave out Julie, who's part of the Rules of Code Guild.
I've got so many thoughts. Like, number one, like, if we're going to standardize, I feel like we want to do that soon, because if everyone goes down the track, if everyone goes and does it and starts doing it, they're all going to start doing it their own way. Then trying to standardize it and getting everyone to redo everything they've already done is going to be even harder, right? It's kind of like now, of course, if the whole world spoke English, we could all talk to each other, but, we all have our established languages. So not everyone is going to just switch to English now, right? And I feel like it's sort of the same thing. If everyone goes too far down the track now, will we be able to still standardize at that point? I actually think it's kind of a good time to get that going if we're going to do it. But on the other hand, I remember Matti also said we need to have a critical mass of interested parties first to kind of, be able to establish the foundation. But it's almost like
chicken egg.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's
a
the
little
real
bit.
chicken and egg thing. I was reading something a little while ago. It was actually an article talking about government regulation, and is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And it was just using the train network in the United States as an example. And there are many others, but trains, when they were first invented, everyone had their own size train. They all had their own size of tracks. Trains are useless in a short distance. They offer zero value, exceptionally expensive. And if they are carrying a handful of people, they were pointless. And so it wasn't until at the federal level in the US, they basically said, actually, no, there is one gauge width for all trains right across the country. There is one standard now for brakes. There is one standard for and they put out regulation to basically say, these are the things that a train needs to comply with. And what that allowed was for a train to go from one side of the country to the other. And that made them useful, right? Until then, they were the most useless invention of all time. So regulation, I think a lot of the time can seem a bit useless, but it does actually add a lot of value. And in this case, it's not necessarily regulation, but standardization. There are a lot of complexities globally, and there are a lot of complexities in trying to integrate ideas across regions. And it's one of the things that Open FISCA kind of helps with as well, is providing a standard tool to say, okay, anyone right across the globe, you can use this as a standard way of implementing rules as code. So right at the start of the journey, there is actually a lot of benefit in, creating something like a foundation and basically saying, well, actually, we've got some standards and we've got the ways that we do it. You're not forced to use them, but if you do, the benefit is that you join in with a much larger community where everyone can actually start to grow and develop together, instead of everyone just kind of going off on their own.
Thanks, Kurt. I love the train analogy. And I live not far away from a very little train. It's not the standard gauge in way here. Anyway, maybe we should move on to another question. Why might this be challenging to get off the ground? What are the things that we are running headlong into, guys? If we decide in some way or another that the guild should be involved in forming or indeed becoming the Rules as Code Foundation. I think you highlighted. Yeah, I think time and money are the most obvious ones, which are not insoluble. If there is a global need for something, and that is definitely emerging, everybody in the room has seen, that start happening, whether it's in countries, jurisdictions that exist and have existed for a long time, or indeed in the online world, in the Web3 world. Rules, machine-readable rules, are definitely becoming a requirement in one way or another. So there's definitely a need, and when there's a need, there's always time that can be paid for with money by someone. So I think we could solve that one, but there are multitudes of other challenges.
Oh, look, there's sort of two that come to my mind. The first one's obvious. It's the first thing, extending on what Julie just said. Julie, I half heard you. I think it was money, right? Yeah, just funding, right, to sustainably support the formation of the foundation and the ongoing presence of the foundation, obviously. The second one, and again, it's that chicken and the egg thing around being able to attract key industry, industry association, government influencers to be part of this, that have influence, that have the reach, that can contribute to this. So I think they're the two initial things that come to mind around at least forming the challenges to form a foundation. Yeah,
I think tying it to the higher sort of
purpose,
higher calling of Rules as Code. So at the Open FISCA launch event, there was a lot of discussion in that event about open government, about the need in this world with different, forms of government, authoritarian or leaning towards that, or less democratic practices, whatever they may be, the need for having open government, even more importantly, to support an open democracy, for example. It doesn't have to be for democracy, but having open, transparent rules in government, and that sort of cracking the code, the OECD report and UN's and the that report and the OECD support for Rules as Code sort of reinforces that it is an important aspect or component of an open, transparent government, which is important for a free and open society. And I think keeping that in mind when we're trying to structure a charter, establish funding, all those sorts of things would help, because then it's not just trying to solve a small problem around standards and taxonomy, which is all important, and other research in important areas, in whatever other areas the foundation may want to invest or fund in, but just trying to sort of establish that charter and try to remind people of why it's important, and getting anchor members obviously involved, key people involved in the founding of it, to again attract the attention from the right people, the right influences, to be able to attract the funding, to be able to then go and do these great things.
Thank you. So putting aside money for a second and trying not to drop into solutions, what might be the challenges of getting those people together? Assuming in this budget for a second, let's live in Alice in Wonderland world for a second. Time is not an issue because we have the money to pay for it. So, and potentially pay for an incentive to be involved even. So, like want to take money out of the problem set entirely for a second, whether it's for the foundation and the people starting the foundation or for the people engaging in the foundation, right? Money is not the issue. There's plenty of money to go around. Let's take it out. What are the other problems? So
I would think
yeah, go ahead.
one of the big ones in my mind is around agreement, right? If you're trying to standardize how we actually implement rules as code, there are many different ways to do this right now. So Open FISCA is one of the main things that we use, but there are also proprietary systems out there that do this. There's blocks, there's a whole bunch of other open source systems as well. So when trying to come up with a standardized way of doing things, somebody or everybody is going to have to make some changes if we're trying to drive some alignment. And so trying to get some of that agreement between a whole bunch of different people would be quite difficult. And I think that adds to some of that difficulty of trying to attract a large enough, diverse group of people into a group or a foundation to start coming up with those things of like, what are the common ways that we actually start working in this space so that we can make it easier for governments and other entities around the world to actually work. I think, that to me is always going to be the biggest one. I think, Joe, you mentioned it before, like there's There are always ways to come up with money and time and people. Getting people to agree can be very difficult, though.
So you centered standards in your thinking there, right? As being the core
I did, yeah.
of the foundation. So that you see as kind of the primary thing and the primary challenge for the foundation to potentially solve, right? Do you think that needs to be solved, or some way of thinking about that or framing that needs to be solved in order to get the foundation off the ground, or the foundation could be formed to solve that problem? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it?
I get your point. Yes. No, I mean, I think that would be one of the challenges of the foundation, to be honest, rather than getting it off the ground. But I guess along those lines, trying to then gather the interest of enough people from different rules as code organizations around the place to want to join in and actually drive towards that goal, I think would be the first challenge.
Yeah, I'll just extending on actually what Con was saying earlier. I mean, putting money, time aside, us being able to, that larger calling, right? Us being able to have a clear vision, mission, calling, that is a big enough problem with a big enough value proposition to attract these, you know, early, I think Con referred to them as anchor members who want to help be part of it. I think, yeah, I think being able to frame and articulate that and get in front of these candidate members to for them to be bought into the problem and want to be part of it. That'd be putting, again, money and time aside. I feel like that would be the next challenge, and the work involved in articulating that and going out and starting those conversations. And yeah.
Cool. There's one problem. I want to table another one, which is the dynamic. I put a link in the chat to the Open Government Partnership. It's not a foundation, it's a partnership, and it is essentially public servants that are part of that partnership. So it is funded. I don't know how it's funded, but there is a group of people that are working as public servants, right? And then in the rules as code area, we have public servants, and we have a lot of commercial players, right? So not just coding people either, legal people, lawyers, and you've got two groups that need to come together, right? Collaboration is the only way that rules as code actually gets done. So yeah, is that a problem, do you think, for the foundation up front that needs solving? Is actually getting that mash of academic, public service, commercial interests together in one place? And do we need to get all of those interests together in one place for a foundation to form?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a need. If we're focusing just on the engineering side of things, it's never really going to achieve its goal, right? There is a really broad mix of people needed in something like this. You know, policy and legal people are extremely important. And having just come out of government, I think it definitely needs people from within government, because there's a lot of perception, I think, from the outside in of what's happening inside the government tent. It's very different inside that tent when you're trying to kind of make sense of the regular occurrence when the rules actually don't necessarily make sense together. A lot of rules and legislation are developed that affect other bits of rules and legislation, and then they're developed based on deals between parties who have got different, you know, portions of power to actually push legislation through. And part of the difficulty of people operating inside government is to make sense then of the result of all of those different deals, in order to provide, like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's providing services to taxpayers and people who are out there in the public, needing to use government services. It's a really, really complicated space. So getting that broad representation is, yeah, it's absolutely vital.
So just the complexity of the types of players that need to be involved to actually make this work is a challenge to address up front before we even start down the path. Go, Con. You're on mute though.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Sorry. So they would all be responding to their own needs. So, you know, policy developers need rules code, as Pia had mentioned in her talk, you know, for testing their policies before they implement them, make sure they're consistent. So being able to have the digital representation of a policy guideline regulation is a need that they have. And developers would love to have some standards or taxonomies available around rules as code to know where to start, or to know that they are building something. Business analysts, lawyers, whoever they may be, I think all have expressed an interest and a need for it. And so I think it's not easy, but I think you would, because of that, I think you would get their time and attention. It's also, I think, Jo, we've been talking around standards, taxonomy standards, and that being the main focus of the foundation, you know, a research piece and what have you, a deliverable out of that. But yeah, there's also, maybe there's other things that the foundation could be focused on and investing in addition to that, and alongside that. I'm not sure what they are, but I'm sure there will be other things. It's unless we're sort of suggesting that that's its main purpose, or is it wider than that, would you think?
Wouldn't it also just be really to promote the, like kind of what you said about Matti going around to the different and trying to promote open fiscal, like actually going around to the different government bodies and actually promoting rules as code as a whole, whereby, you know, open fiscal could be part of the solution, but it could be anything else for that matter. Yeah,
that's a good point.
Just a couple of things. Firstly, 100% agree that the association need to be diverse, and for all the obvious benefits of having a diverse set of members. It's interesting that you know, and ideally it's a mix of, you know, academia, of government, of industry. Just an example where it has been challenging, but I've seen it, is the human impact, unintended, intended consequences, policy framework stuff that Pia Andrews has been championing, bringing together academia, bringing together industry, bringing together government to come in. Now, I don't want to pretend it's been all rosy and smooth, but it's sort of an example of, you know, a diverse set of different members, each with their own interests, and coming in and being able to benefit as a whole by each of them contributing, right? And it's tough. It's really tough.
Takes quite a lot of time and money.
Yep. But that was but we said that was not a problem, right? So we can dream.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And if there is enough of a need driving it all, you can get there. So we're 45 minutes in, guys. There's so much to discuss on this subject. It's a project all in its own. And I appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. What should we do next, if anything? Right? Doing nothing is always an option. As a policy advisor once told me, you have to include that. Do nothing is the first one you include. Do nothing. We leave this as it is, and we keep going with the guild, and we keep doing what we're doing, or even improve what we're doing as well. That's always an option too. But regarding the foundation, thoughts, what we should or could do next?
Yeah, while we were talking, I put some pen to paper and came up with sort of like a, possible pathway for us to consider if we were to. And sort of number one is actually, again, going back to, I think something Con said earlier, is actually defining the mission, vision, purpose of the foundation with a clear value proposition, right? For a thriving, standardized, interoperable rules as code industry. That's sort of one, being clear on that. And then two, identifying who are those key diverse anchor members that we could possibly attract that be interested in helping going on the journey, fulfill the vision. The third one would be having those conversations with those candidates across the diverse set of groups, like we've talked about, academia, industry, government, and then independent of that, the fourth would be the funding part, government grants, industry member contributions. So that would be sort of things that come to mind if I think about if we were to do this. There would be sort of some of the things to consider.
Thanks, Alfred. Nice, neat list. Anybody got anything to add?
Well, I was just thinking about if we're attracting that broad group, one of the things to add to that initial list is making sure everyone understands the engineers are right. Just at the beginning, and not getting any
understand
confusion.
The what? Sorry, understand the what?
Understanding that the engineers are right. Just getting that at the beginning and making sure that there's no confusion, I think, is important.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that was.
All right.
Yep.
There you go. First hurdle.
There you go. Yeah, the biggest one actually.
Yeah.
Not the citizen, Kirk. Not the citizen. The citizen isn't right.
The citizen engineers, yeah.
This has been fun. Thank you. I think it's a good start to the conversation. I'm going to be making some notes from this, which I will add to our Slack channel for anybody else that has been watching this, that is probably going to the screen. Why didn't you talk about this? And what about that? And you didn't even touch on. Please do come and engage with the RaC Guild as it stands at the moment, which is this group of people, but there are a whole bunch more. You can go to racguild.org and racguild.org and find the other members on one of the pages there, and find the events that happen, which always happen on the first Wednesday of the month. Our time zones change though. Thanks, Julie. That's awesome. So the next one is the 3rd of September. You'll be able to find the link for that. You'll be able to sign up for it and come along to the next meeting. We will have a presentation at the next meeting. But in the meantime, as I say, there is a Slack channel. You can also find the link to the Slack channel on our website too, and engage in this conversation, because I think you can hear that there is a mood to take this forward in one way, shape or form. So we invite you to participate in that in whatever way you can. You can also leave comments underneath the YouTube video here. Just a reminder, go back to RaC Guild number 11 to hear the original proposer of this idea for a RaC Guild Foundation, which was Matti Schneider from the Open Fiscal Association. Thanks everybody today for coming along and participating in this. And I will speak to you all again very soon. Look forward to seeing you at the next RaC Guild Town Hall.